YouTube, this is Rogue Saber's Rent and Reviews, and we'll be talking about War Thunder. I've got to say, this is a game that I have really enjoyed ever since I first heard about it and picked it up. Well, you can't physically pick it up. Downloaded it online. And, since I've been playing flight sims for years, having another well-done World War II flight sim is just, well, why wouldn't I get it? I'd like to talk about this game quite in a little bit more detail in that, well, first off, when I'm recording this, the game is at patch 1.37, which, if you know anything about the history of Russian developers, and especially Russian developers of games like IL-2, you very immediately realize, oh, well, that game isn't done yet. This game is very much still an open beta. Even though you can spend money, you will spend money, unless you're hideously poor like I am. The game is very far from done. It's basically the design of the game has been based on the idea of the game being a sort of military simulator of both land, sea, and air combat from the era of about 1933 to 1953. I was bored a couple nights ago, and when they first announced the game, they had a release tree put up on their website. It's still up. You can go see it if you want, as to what they intended to have in the game. There are over 200 aircraft not yet in game from that release tree. 200. And they've also added aircraft that weren't on the release tree, to give you an idea of just how far from complete the game actually is. Right now, only the aircraft part of the game is playable live in the normal server. There is a test server for the ground combat that I don't have access to, but I think ground combat is probably going to be coming in just a couple months, so that's not that big a deal, at least to me. I mean, I can satisfy my ground combat needs with Worlds of Tanks for a little while yet, despite how hideously inaccurate and unhistorical World of Tanks is. Now, as a flight sim junkie, I use a joystick. There's been a lot of discussion online about the difference in this game between joystick use and mouse aim use, as to how the aircraft behave and so forth, but I'm actually not one of those people that's going to say, oh, the mouse aimers are cheating all the time and yada yada yada. It's just different, guys. Mouse aim only works in 2 of the 3 major gaming modes in this game. Mouse aim works on arcade and realistic battles. Arcade battles are basically what you would expect. When you fly arcade battles in War Thunder, the best comparison I can think of is, imagine the Ace Combat series from PlayStation and Xbox, and then imagine it being World War II aircraft. That's basically what arcade battles are like. Except everyone is a player. There are bots, and you will encounter them, but they're not nearly as common at lower level battles, especially in arcade, so bots aren't that big a deal. They exist, you can shoot them down for some points, but that's all. The way that the battles are set, the game has been set up, is kind of unique among these flight sim, among MMOs. Most MMOs seem to use the same sort of model as World of Tanks, and this has a lot of similarities in how the user interface and how some elements of it function. The major difference is that instead of being limited to X number of vehicles at any one time for all nations, which is what World of Tanks does. Each nation has its own set of slots, and instead of being vehicle slots, they are crew slots. This is something that Jingles went into detail when he released his Introduction to War Thunder video. And since I don't want to go over ground that he's covered, I suggest you go watch that video, and he'll explain it in more detail than I will, because it's... One of the things I will cover is the difference between... They changed the way upgrades work between his release of the Introduction to War Thunder video and now. Currently, you research a set of upgrades and then get them installed and so forth. Whereas in the original, 95 octane fuel? Is that new? I haven't noticed. Whereas originally, as you gained experience with a plane, upgrades would unlock and you just buy them. Instead, you allocate research points instead of you research the upgrades with research points that you gain in game instead of experience points. I'm not sure how the crew experience now works with the RP system, but I assume it's pretty similar to the way it used to be, but I'm not entirely sure. I'm a casual gamer at heart, so knowing some of this stuff would require me flying a lot more than I usually tend to do. As I said, I'm a bit of a propeller head. The first game I ever played when I was 5 years old was a very ancient game called AV-8B Harrier, so I tend to fly aircraft. I tend to fly aircraft with joysticks exclusively. So I will explain why I think that there are a number of people that fly joysticks online that have complained about the mouse aim system in this game making mouse aim much too easy for players. And in some ways it's true, in some ways it's not. The way mouse aim works in this is there is an instructor, which is basically what happens when you're using mouse aim is that the mouse aim system has your aircraft basically having a AI system take your inputs and commands and translate them to actual movement of actually what the airplane does. So as a result, I would basically liken it to as the difference between fly-by-wire controls and manual controls. For those of you that aren't familiar with flight simulation, fly-by-wire controls basically does that exact same thing in modern aircraft. Almost all modern aircraft use fly-by-wire controls because a lot of them are designed to be inherently unstable, and it's actually just plain dangerous for manual controls to be used with those aircraft. Now, in many ways this game works a lot like World of Tanks. You have a starting set of aircraft, which is the reserves, and with those reserve aircraft you gain research points and slowly unlock other aircraft. Instead of being a tech tree like in World of Tanks where there's a direct link with having X type gun unlocked, getting X tank, and so forth, the unlock system is basically a direct line. Whereas, I say basically direct line is there are elements to this that aren't that way. As a good example is the reserve tree itself for the Russians here. You see there are three aircraft, the Polikarpov I-15WR, the Polikarpov I-15 M22, the Polikarpov I-15R, and then I-15 BIS. Wait, that's not a reserve plane! That's because in order to get this plane you have to research it, and then buy it, and then select a crew for it. And I'll get into the way this mechanic works in detail later, but basically because eventually we're probably going to have closer to 300 to 400 actual aircraft in the game, you can't possibly fit them all in this tree. So, this tree will represent basically the families of aircraft. So, you have the I-15 family, which is, I actually call it the I-15 line, here. The next patch will introduce 2 more I-16s, which will be put in that box, almost certainly. At some point, these 2 aircraft, the MiG-315 and MiG-315 with the BK pods, will be put together in a single family box, just to keep the line clean and understandable. But it also means that you don't need to research all the planes in a family line to get to the next aircraft in the line. Like, here, I have the Lag-3 35, Series 35, and unlocked. I have not finished researching the Lag-3 Series 66. It says it requires 17,000 research points. However, since I have the earlier Lag, I can start researching the Lavochkin LA-5. Which, if I'm honest, unless I really wanted to play a Lag, I have no idea who you are. The Lag-3 series is a great example of Russian aircraft at its worst during the Second World War. And we just jumped to the Lavochkin LA-5, I could do that. And since the way the points are allocated, I wouldn't even have to fly the Lag-3. I could fly any other aircraft that I owned and have research points allocated to that aircraft, which actually makes it a lot more flexible and the grind a lot easier in a lot of ways, which is definitely a point in his favor. Now, you notice that on the side here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 tiers. There's actually 5. It's not fully... Oh, come on. The 5th tier down here, which is exclusively jets in this case. Personally, I don't think that's going to stay just jets, but that's just me. There's 5 tiers spanning the time frame between 1933 to 1945. They actually roughly correlate to eras, but they're not, for example, they're not completely accurate as to the time frames. For example, the Lag-311 here really is a Tier 2 aircraft. The Lag-38 really is a Tier 2 aircraft as well. The Tier 1 is basically your pre-war aircraft. This is stuff like the I-15s, in the case of the Russian line. In the case of the British line, you have stuff like the Hawker Furies, Gloucester Gladiators, Swordfish Mark 1s. The Hurricane Mark 1 actually is a Tier 1 because it's a 1938, but it's borderline in my mind. But these 2 aircraft I think should probably be moved down. There's aircraft on the release tree that would be lower tier than these 2. That would definitely probably bump these down to make a more logical line. A lot of the complaints about balancing issues and battle ratings I think are partly due to the fact that most of these tech trees are so far from complete it's not even funny. Especially if you look at the complete tech trees. A great example is Americans. On the tech tree, we're supposed to get the B-29. Guess what? It ain't there. The most advanced aircraft we get available is the B-24D, and if you look at the tech tree, the release tree that they talked about, there's, in the bomber line, there's going to be like 4 other variants of the B-24. They're not in game. We're supposed to get the B-18 Bolo. Actually, I'm kind of excited because I like flying low-tier planes, and that would be a Tier 1 2-engine bomber. In fact, I would almost say that's if you really wanted to get serious about historical accuracy, that might actually be a reserve bomber. It is so old school. Now, B-25. Anyone that knows history can see a lot of glaring omissions right away. Yeah, we have the P-47. We have one version of the P-38. We have the P-63 King Cobra, which really wasn't that common. We have a couple of versions of the P-51. And we start out with the P-26 on the fighter line. The fighter line is actually mostly complete in terms of general families, but there's a lot of individual models that aren't in the game yet. But the bomber line is another story. Yeah, we have the SBD, the TBF, the A-20. Where's the B-26? It's not there. Where's the A-26? It's not there. Attack line. Where's the A-36 Apache? Well, it's gonna come, but it ain't there yet. There's lots of cases like that. And it's just a case of, yeah, the game's not finished. Move on. I think a lot of people don't get that. They're like, oh, I paid for it. Is this really still beta? It really is. It's... There's a lot of aircraft that are coming that will fill in major gaps. There's a lot of planes I'm excited to get that aren't in yet. We have the F9f Panther. Recently, Gaijin, which is the developer, has been focused a lot on Korean War aircraft, which is kind of sad considering I haven't gotten there yet. But Korean War aircraft, I would really love to have the Cutlass. I think its designation is F7U, but that's a multi-role carrier-based fighter-bomber from the Korean War. It's not actually on the release tree, but I would be shocked if it didn't actually show up eventually. The German line, well, it's complete and it's not. It's another example of this is we have one version of the 110. There's like 16 on the release tree, so it's well away from complete. We're getting the A1 model, the 190, Focke-Wulf 190, but that wasn't actually on the release tree, so there's all sorts of aircraft that are actually in game that weren't on the release tree at launch as to what they plan to have, but they've actually included them already. I can't wait to eventually when we get the HS-123, which would be probably the aircraft at the very top of this line, which is a ground attack biplane. And it was used in 1939, and 1940, and even a little bit in 41 against the Russians to great success as a low-altitude ground attack platform. Despite the fact that I have far from finished researching down the 109 line, I've already got my favorite aircraft, because I'm a big fan of the F series of 109s. Especially like the F4 and so forth. So since I unlocked the F1 version of the 109, I've been happy just to keep derping around flying that plane instead of doing any serious research in anything else. I'll probably be more than happy when the 190 comes out, because the 190 is really a workhorse. But as I said, there's a lot of stuff that they planned on having that isn't in yet. There's the P version of the HE-111 that's not in yet. There's all sorts of versions of JU-88. The number of variants for the JU-88 is absurd historically, so the sheer number of variants that we're going to probably get on that is also mind-blowing. They have the Dornier 217, but they do not have the DO-117 or DO-17. The Germans had this weird tendency, middle of the war, early war, when they were developing immediate sequels to aircraft, that instead of giving them a completely new designation, they'd make it 100 more. So you have the 110, which eventually became the 410. You have the DO-17, which became the 217, and so forth. Now, the Dorniers, I'm actually more excited to get the bomber versions than the night fighters and assault versions that we have now. But that's just my personal tastes, I think, at work. Late war stuff is... They've announced that the Germans will actually get some post-war aircraft. They will also... that weren't actually on the release tree. They're planning on giving them the Luftwaffe, when it was reconstituted in like 54, received F-86 Sabres, so those will be in game for the Germans, and the East Germans will also get the MiG-15 BIS, which I'm like, okay, whatever. For the highest tier stuff, you need that. Now, I say eras, but the truth is the way this game's set up, there are actually 21 tiers. It's just people don't know it. With each aircraft, if you look at the stat card, you have repair cost, so forth, so forth. Battle rating! You have rank 2 aircraft with battle rating of 3.3. The battle rating is its actual tier, is actually just how far down the tech tree it is. Truthfully, the closest you have to World of Tanks tiering system, where you have tier 1 through 10. The thing is the battle ratings go from 1.0 to 7.7. And they come in increments of 0.3. Well, around 0.3, because it goes 0.3, 0.7. It's roughly a third of a battle rating with each increment. Is that as a result of this, you have to understand that originally there were 21 separate ranks. There was a rank 0 for reserve aircraft and 20 ranks, so that's 21. The battle rating system took that, and since they compressed the ranks into basically 5 ranks, which are the separate major eras, it makes it so that the actual tier is the battle rating. And you can have lots and lots of debates about battle rating, and under-tiered and over-tiered and so forth. But I think the real reason that you're going to see a lot of what really seems like serious balance issues with the tiering in this game is because the lineups aren't complete. They're still quite a ways away from complete. A good example with the 109 line is, if you think about the 109 series, in the way the game is set up, it starts with HE51, yeah, HE112, which is okay. I actually like that plane. It's got a wing design a lot like the Spitfire, so it's very maneuverable, even at low speed. And then it goes to the E model. Well, in the release tree, that's not your first 109. It should go from the 112 to the B model, then the C model, then the D model, and then you get to the EMILs, and there's going to be more versions of the EMILs. Then you get to the Fs. The Fs are actually mostly complete. There weren't that many F models. Then you get to the G series. Oh god, were there a lot of models of the G series. And then you get to the K, down here, and at that point you're really trucking it. And then it goes to 163s. We were actually supposed to get some of the paper planes, the prototype designs for the 262. It's actually on the release tree, and while there was a lot of huff on the forums about, oh, we're not gonna get the HE262, HG1, HG2, HG3 now, because of the decision to include the MiGs and the Sabres in the German tech tree. They're still on the release tree. It's still coming. Sure, the release tree hasn't been updated, but I doubt that they've rescinded that decision. There's actually some truly paper planes on the release tree. The Blohem Voss has got a aircraft that didn't even come close to coming in the prototype stage. Kurt Tank's TA-183 Huckbind is on the release tree. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done. The game is fully playable. It's a lot of fun, but it is far from finished, and that's one of the first things you have to understand when you play this game, is it's still very much in development. Those of us that have played IL-2, it's sort of like, yeah, well, I played IL-2 Forgotten Battles. You didn't play IL-2. Basically, IL-2 really isn't fit. I wouldn't even call it fully complete now. They're still releasing patches and add-ons and so forth. They added multi-turret function and stuff in recent patches. And they're on version 12. And IL-2 was released, oh god. I feel old. I'm not sure how long ago it was released. It was released a long time ago, and they're still updating it. I think you can expect a development cycle time that is roughly like that. We're on version 1.39. The game will not be done until we're in version 12 or so. So, it's like, so much stuff is coming! I'm so excited! Now, the gameplay is pretty simple. You have arcade battles, realistic battles, and simulator battles. Simulator battles are extremely difficult if you do not have any sort of track IR system, and it requires joystick controls. I don't play simulator battles because, for one thing, my eyesight's not that great, and it's very much, you really need track IR or an Oculus Rift or something like that to actually get a good view, because this is restricted exclusively to Cockpit. Realistic battles is where I play almost all of my missions, except when I have those rare moments where I'm like, I'm sick of this! I keep dying! I'm gonna load up a whole bunch of biplanes and I'm gonna fly rank 0 stuff. Arcade battles. And I actually did that not that while ago. This is what my lineup for the for Britain is. This is all, let's see, I think the highest tier thing in here is, Gladiator 1.3, Nimrod Mark II is 1.0. Yeah, the highest rated plane is the Gladiator Mark II. The Mark I is also on the release tree, and it's not in the game yet. So it's sort of like, there's lots of stuff that still coming. More stuff is still coming. Wonder if they don't have the HE280, which is something that would be an interesting addition, but whatever. There's lots of stuff that I'm waiting for with much anticipation. And it's kind of funny, is online everyone is still posting suggestions for aircraft. I'm like, I want the IB-49, I want the B-36, I want a lot more aircraft that normally don't see much action or even use in games. I do have to admit that those of you that are from any sort of EVE Online background, I still play EVE Online occasionally, so I will actually be posting some videos from that on this channel as well. But Mittens, the Goon Fleet Overlord, his website posted an article about this game, and one of the things they said in the article is the country you want to fly is Russia. Well, it still holds true right now. There is a Russian bias in this game. It is not as severe as a lot of people say. Most irritating, the most likely thing that will feel like a severe Russian bias, I think it's actually caused due to them not having a complete lineup yet, is a lot of the aircraft seem really, really under-tiered. Flying the F Model 109, I've regularly ended up in fights with Yak 9Ts, Yak 9 and Yak 3s. I shut down a Yak 3P when I was like, yes! And I was like, wait, isn't that a 1945 aircraft? So there are some tiering issues. The next patch will actually make some of the tiering issues for some of the aircraft even worse. The Lag 3s are getting bumped down some tiers. Admittedly, the Lag 3s are crap aircraft, and if you know what you're doing, you can easily shoot them down, but it is still rather annoying for a pilot to have to deal with that. But if you're the one bit of Russian bias that I think is clearly Russian bias is the decision to use the Polikarka 515 for the reserve aircraft. Because no other reserve aircraft gets 4 machine guns. Every other reserve aircraft is a 2 machine gun aircraft. And if you look at the turn time and stuff, it's like ridiculous. The I-15s turn at have a turn rate of a 180-degree turn of 8 seconds, and every other nation's is more like 16. So if there is there is some Russian bias, it seems to be much more prevalent at lower ratings than higher ones, but as I said, part of it is still that the game is not finished. Now, I'm going to take out... I'll fly the I-16 Rada. This is actually one of my favorite aircraft in the Russian line. What a lot of people don't understand is that if you did historical triering, this thing is what would fight most 109 most of the early 109 variants, and it actually does quite all right. Historically, it did better than the more advanced Lag series against the 109. So much so that the Russians restarted production of it in 1941 with the I-16 Type 30. And while this is just the machine gun armed ones, there are variants that have cannons. We're going to get one of those variants in the main line in the next patch. And if you can't wait, there's a premium version that has the 20mm Shevak cannons. So, I fly realistic battles, so let's get started. Here we go, it's Korea. Korea is one of the operations that you can get in historical battles. One of the things that you'll note is the historical battles take much longer to fly than arcade battles, but the rewards for shooting down aircraft have been adjusted accordingly. Korea is, to my mind, it works a lot better if it's much higher tier than tier 1, but it can be a lot of fun, even at low tiers. Who knows, maybe eventually they'll make it so that pre-war aircraft don't have to fight in Korea. That would make sense. Now this is the cockpit for the I-16. One of the things I like about the I-16 is if you're familiar with the 20s and 30s, it feels like you're flying a barnstormer, like a barnstorming racing plane. It's just got that 20s, 30s feel to it. Now, I tend to fly with the virtual cockpit. I know a lot of YouTubers don't. They let you see the airplane, but to my mind, this is one of the best ways to fly the planes, is that you have the best vision. And maybe it's partly because I'm rather used to modern avionics. Like, I'm not sure you'll be able to see it in the video, but you can see a little plane icon. That actually shows where the plane is actually going. Not where you're pointing, but where the plane will actually be going. Because planes don't fly straight the direction you point them. That's just the way things work in an aircraft. Now, let's see. We've got a fairly big matchup. Maximum matchup right now is 16v16, and this looks like we're pretty close to that. Our side is made up almost exclusively of I-16s and I-153s, along with a couple SB2M series fast bombers in an issue 2. The SB2M is it's actually a lot of fun to fly. You wouldn't expect a bomber to be fun to fly in most online multiplayer games, but the SB2M series is a lot of fun to fly, mostly because it behaves not the way you would expect a bomber to behave. It has flight characteristics of almost like a mid-war fighter in a lot of ways. It's heavy, it rolls kind of slowly, but it's fast, and it's actually surprisingly maneuverable. And actually that was what it was entirely designed to be, was a fast bomber. SB designation in the pre-war designation system that the Russians used means fast bomber. The release tree also included the DB, which is the DB3. And actually we already have a variant of the DB3 in game, it's just no one knows it. It's known as the IL-4. But we'll probably get the complete DB3 tier tree at some point, and the DB series basically is a medium bomber. The TB3 is in-game, but it is an extremely rare plane to have. there was an event run that allowed you to get it, and the TB3 is basically one of the world's first heavy bombers. It was a 4-engined monoplane constructed bomber and first flown by the Russian Air Force in 1933. It is a beast. It has open cockpit. Can you imagine a 4-engined bomber with an open cockpit and open basket seats for gunners and so forth? It's really ahead of its time, but it is slow. It's hilarious. I think the reason it's an event plane is because there's no way anyone could use it much in a historical battle. At least the way historical battles are now. There's talk in future patches of increasing the decreasing the distance between the airfields and the targets for lower tier aircraft. So maybe then the TB3 would be more viable as a bomber in historical and realistic battles. I bet it would be absolutely hilarious in low tier arcade battles. Okay, we have our first enemy contact. You see the red? It's a F2a Brewster Buffalo, which is one of the first of the line of planes used by the US Navy. Historically, it actually did really well against the Russians in the Winter War, so that's actually quite a dangerous aircraft. Climbing up here in the clouds, we have another Brewster Buffalo. 3 kilometers. There's a P-40 way down there. He almost looks like he crashed. One thing with the I-16 is it's kind of a twitchy plane. It's very lightweight, but when you hit the stall speed, it can wobble severely. And that's actually one of the differences between the sort of controls you get with that guy's coming after me. Kharkov I-16 versus F2a Brewster Buffalo. He's past me.
Take him down.
This is in a wide turn. Yep. I'm actually not sure who has the turning advantage. I think it's the I-16. But one of the things with joystick controls is you can push the aircraft too far, which is something that the instructor system that's used by the... Oh dear. Do I want to... God, they're all over the place. So you could push the plane too far in ways that you can't do with mouse aim. Which means you can push it further than it normally would go, but at the same time you're liable to lose control. Which actually makes the mouse aim much better for new pilots, but you're not going to be able to maneuver as well. There's a P-40. That's a dangerous plane. That's an EMIL version of the P-40, which actually means it's 1942 production. Whoa! And I've got 4 Shikas machine guns in here. I'm using stealth ammo, which basically means there's no tracer. I actually like stealth ammo, but there are some psychological reasons to use tracer ammo. It's just, you don't have much choice once you take off. And I've got ground fire. So I'm in trail here. He's not going to be able to shake me. I'm an I-16, and he's got friends. And I just pushed the play too far. It cost a snap roll, but it made him overshoot. And I actually got some hits on him. Excellent. I have you now. Where'd his friends go? This is really dangerous. 2 P-40s. Something's smoking on his plane. He's not turning my way. He's too damaged. Oh! There's another guy. And I've overheated the engine. Oh! God, that's a... One of the things that people joke about with Russian aircraft is studding wood. It's very impossible to kill. Oh! I'm going down. A Spitfire. Well, that wasn't under-tiered. They had some good planes on the other team. Spitfire Mark 1. I was chasing 2 P-40s. Well. Middle of the pack wasn't so bad. Didn't get any kills, but then getting bounced by P-40s and Spitfires in I-16 can do that to you, yeah? Despite that, I was middle of the pack. No, wasn't a bad game. And it was a win. So, I got 1,114 research points for the iShack. I already have all that, all the unlocks for the iShack, I think, so yeah. Oh, that was for if I had a premium account. I don't have a premium account. So 866. That's not bad. And I'm researching the BK model of the Bikoyat. So that's War Thunder, and I'm planning on having a video up about once a week on this game. Yes, I really do enjoy it. I'll start reviewing some of the aircraft. I think I'll start with my favorite plane. The 109F. This has been Rogue Saber's Rents and Reviews. See you around.